Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel Bilingual Mingle. My name is Tanya, and in today's video I would like to discuss main types of books that are present on the market for toddlers in nowadays, the importance of balance between books for bilingual children, and how to choose and read bilingual books to our kids. If you haven't done it yet, please make sure to subscribe to my channel down below so you won't miss the next video. I'm trying to be consistent with posting my videos on this channel at least once a week, closer to the end of the week. And also please hit the like button if you like this video, and this way you're going to encourage me to create more content on this channel for bilingual households. So before I really had Leon, I didn't really even think about the existence of bilingual books, and I was not aware of a rich really variety of books that exist on the market today for toddlers. And I had this very general first-time parent mentality that reading a book is just another activity that you could have with your child, participate in it with your child from time to time, and enjoy it together and have fun. I didn't really expect my child to have very specific book preferences for his morning, afternoon, and evening book reading times, and I definitely didn't know and really knew a few things about the necessity of juggling and how to juggle bilingual book rotation above all this. So once I finally gave up, and it was it was pretty soon after he was born, and when I understood that we have very specific book needs because we're raising Leon as a bilingual child. So only when I finally gave up and saved my search preferences for toddler book hits on Amazon, I found out about this variety of different books that are available for toddlers on the market in nowadays. So based on my observation, I could list 9 main types of books. It's going to be board book, picture book, folklore awareness, myth-related books, fairy tales, interactive books, poetry books, rhyming books, alphabet books, and books to learn how to count. However, obviously for a 2-year-old toddler, not all those types of books are going to be interesting right away, so don't feel like you have to have each of those types of books right now in your library if you're raising a 2-year-old child. The types of books that are especially popular in our household, and Leon is going to be 19 months this upcoming Sunday. So it's going to be board books, picture books, obviously interactive books, rhyming books, and alphabet books. So as you can see, since he is definitely saying less words in each language in comparison with a monolingual child, he prefers to deal with picture books more rather than books with some sort of text in. However, each of these types of books needs to be present in both languages in the bilingual household, and it's very important to keep balance between them. So let's talk about balance. Balance needs to be really in everything that is book related. Types of books and their content, that's going to be the first type of balance that you need to observe. You need to make sure that each type is represented in your little one's private library, and those books contain equally interesting and captivating content, not necessarily educational, but captivating content. If it does not happen, you're going to start seeing very quickly that your child starts prioritizing one book in certain language over another book, or for instance, if one type of book is absent in one of the languages that your child is learning, then he's definitely, or she's definitely going to start only defaulting to this type of book in the language that exists in his or her library. That's what happens with interactive books in our household. Unfortunately, in the United States, there are not a lot of interactive books, and by interactive books I mean books where you can pull something out, move maybe like some kind of a wheel, basically interact with a book in certain way. Unfortunately, there are not so many books interactive books exist in Russian in the United States, and definitely we have much more of those books in English than in Russian. In Russian, we probably have couple or maybe even one for Leon's age right now. Next type of balance that needs to be observed is going to be about number of books in each language. A child can't see 15 books in one language and then I don't know, 2 or 5 in another language. The balance needs to be observed. I think the best thing that you could do, because definitely if you're living in the English speaking country, if you live in the United States especially, there's definitely going to be more opportunities to buy or to take book in English rather than in any other language, right? So the best approach to this is going to be to not put all the books that your child is currently reading and engaged in at once on the shelves, and kind of just keep rotation going and rotate books every couple of weeks, but observe this balance in terms of the amount of books for each of the languages that your child is learning. It's also very important to start showing child from the very young age that languages should not be mixed. Believe me, they're anyway going to mix them without our help for a very long time. However, two languages are have two different language systems, obviously, and we as parents and guardians should do everything that we can in order to support this idea and to encourage our children to follow it and to understand it, right? So if you have such opportunity, please make sure to keep books in two languages in two different shelves, or if you don't have two different shelves, make sure that you have some kind of a shelf divider in order to make sure to in order to be able to show to your child that books in each of the languages are located in different in different parts of the shelf, right, of even the room, if it's possible, and the child needs to know exactly where he or she needs to go in order to reach out in order to reach and take out the book in a certain language. Leon actually, and as I mentioned, he's going to be 19 months this upcoming Sunday. Leon actually already knows where he needs to turn. We have two separate shelves for two languages, and Leon perfectly knows to which shelf he needs to refer in order to take certain book. Now, let's talk about bilingual books. I know that for those of you who are watching me right now and don't have a bilingual child yet in their household, this term can sound strange. What is a bilingual book? So bilingual books are actually books that contain text, the same text in both languages. Those types of books also can be called dual language book or side-by-side book. And this is actually a third type of book that should be present in every bilingual household, and parents or guardians of a bilingual child should constantly replenish the library of those books as well. I didn't really know that those types of books exist until I got Leon, and so don't worry if you was not aware of this type as well. But now after 2 years, almost 2 years of raising Leon as a bilingual child, I definitely can provide some pieces of advice regarding how to choose bilingual books. So the first piece of advice is to make sure that you check translation of the book. Translation is everything, and the most discouraging thing that you could encounter in this process is when your childhood story that you was so excited to read to your child, and for your partner to read to your child in his or her native language does not sound the same anymore because of the horrible translation, or God forbid has a slightly different ending from what you remember based on your childhood reading with your parents. Of course, the best thing that you could do in order to prevent those situations from happening is to read the book beforehand, before you buy it. But obviously that's sometimes hard to do because the majority of books in our household we buy it from Amazon, and Amazon really especially for children books, Amazon really presents only the first cover page or the first page and the last page of the book. Very rarely Amazon presents any text in the middle, obviously for copyright reasons. Therefore, before buying a bilingual book, make sure you Google Translator. Translator's last name is usually can be found on the cover of the book, and the two things you need to look out for while you're Googling Translator is whether this translator is has some kind of credentials. Maybe this translator was mentioned somewhere else and has already translated some other books before it, or sometimes actually the author of bilingual book is a bilingual individual who actually speaks both languages and makes translation also on his or her own. So this is also an easy thing to check. And another thing that you need to check is how many times this book was translated. Was it translated from the native language, right? Or maybe that was translated and then retranslated again and or adapted, right? What kind of translation is basically provided in the book. I know that for non-specialists, this kind of information, it would be very hard to judge how good translation is going to be based on those factors, but it's the least you can really do in order to make sure that the book, bilingual book that you're buying is actually going to be beneficial to your child, and he or her is not going to be, he or she is not going to be confused by weird translation of maybe some specific words, a specific vocabulary that's definitely going to confuse them. Also, another thing to pay attention to is how texts in both languages are presented in the book. Both languages need to be equally displayed on the page, and also please make sure that the minor language or second language, right, is not italicized or presented in a smaller font in comparison with the primary language of the book. This actually happens more often than we expect, and I definitely, this is one of the first things I'm making sure to check before I buy a bilingual book. Because from the very young age we need to make sure we teach our child that both languages are equally important in his or her life, and even though the presentation of the text might not seem like a big deal, in our children's heads, this is going to mean that one language is prioritized above another one, right? And obviously it's going to be even harder to pay attention to the secondary language while they're reading the story in a secondary language, pay attention to it and kind of ignore the primary language of the book. Also make sure that the translation is not provided line by line. I saw it very in a really few books, luckily, but this is very confusing to a child. This kind of translation is more common to books for older kids and obviously for adults bilingual books, but I also saw it in actually in a couple of toddler books. If I can find the screenshot of such example of the book, I'll definitely post it here in this video. So what I mean is that one line is basically written in one language and then another line is written in another language in this line by line translation. So in this case, if child is trying to read the story in a specific language, he or she would have to constantly either switch between two different language codes or would have to skip the line, which is very hard to do even for a monolingual person, the person who is just reading a book or story in one language, right? And definitely would be confusing and discouraging. Also, the best placement of text is going to be side by side, either on the same page or on different pages, which would be ideal situation. But of course, not all books contain it, and publishers trying to save space by publishing text and translation of the text on the same page. Finally, it's very important to understand what story you are choosing for bilingual reading time. The best types of stories for this type of reading are going to be those that include multicultural characters like your children, or popular stories that they're already familiar with in one of the languages that they speak. So it could help really him or her to be engaged in reading if characters sound familiar, look familiar, and seem like them. Right, and there's actually a lot of books that I really love. A lot of books about bilingual books about bilinguals, which I think is a really great idea to create. Another great type of stories for bilingual reading time going to be folklore stories that contain a lot of linguistic and cultural realities that are specific to individual cultures, and that would allow allow you and your partner to introduce those realities and the words that stand for those realities in both languages, and through the story explain your child how this specific word is going to be translated from one language to another. Okay, so the next point that I would like to discuss is how to read a bilingual book to your child. So first of all, let's talk about language that we're using to read them. In our family, we are not very particular about languages in which we're reading books to Leon. For instance, I can read books in both Russian and English languages, and while my husband only speaks English, he obviously is going to prefer reading English books over Russian ones, but he is really familiar already with Russian books, and at least can summarize the story to Leon in English if Leon picks a Russian book to read with his dad. It's really very important to give your child a choice of languages in which he wants to read the book. At this age, I highly doubt that Leon makes this choice based on the preferences of the language system that he prefers or likes to use. However, I definitely think that he understands that there are two different languages and there are different books that contain different stories. We really didn't plan it out this way. It's just kind of worked out that the stories, the books that we have in Russian, we don't really have them in English, and we don't read really the same stories in both languages, right, to him, unless there's a bilingual book. So he just chooses a book that he wants to read, and we read in this book to him in the language that it's written. However, when it comes to the bilingual book, since he can't really explain yet with the words which language he prefers, I just default to Russian, and my husband defaults to English because this is the main language of our communication with our son. Make sure though that if you and your partner or just one person in the household, one parent, can't speak both languages like I do, make sure that that the bilingual book is read in both languages equally across a certain amount of time to your child. If you start seeing that your child starts asking more to read the same book in one language and not another one, make sure that you kind of correct this behavior, not obviously to your child, but maybe ask your child to instead of summarize the story, or you can summarize it yourself in the main language of communication with your child, or maybe kind of don't try to push, right, but maybe ask some additional questions about the book and kind of make it more interesting to your child to read it in the language that you speak with your child, or the language that your child starts forgetting or deprioritizing for the reading time. While you're reading the book, don't forget about illustrations. Illustrations, especially in toddlers' books, illustrations are really a great way to practice applying all this new vocabulary that your child is learning while reading bilingual book. And it's really also a great opportunity to check through illustrations whether your child understands what he or she is reading about. Sometimes bilingual child's vocabulary is richer in one language than another, and they're really struggling with understanding the meaning of the same word in the second language that they speak. And a description of illustration that their conversation about certain illustration could really help to fill in those blank spaces, those gaps in their knowledge during this process. If you're dealing with multicultural characters in your story, also don't be afraid to make certain voices or accents of different characters, right? It will really prompt your child to think about the cultural and linguistic diversity in the world, to also feel included, because as I mentioned in my previous videos, our bilingual children are definitely aware that they are different in terms of their language skills from their monolingual peers, and also it will teach them that the accent is a cool thing. And I definitely think that accent is nothing but a thing that you need to be proud of and not try to get rid of unless it prevents you from expressing yourself clearly. Also if you start presenting or start making certain voices, right, and kind of like playing with an accent, if certain character is supposed to have one, that can also help with pronunciation of individual letters or words. This is something that bilingual children are also very often aware of, is they're mispronouncing some words, and that could help them understand that that's okay, that's fine if you mispronounce things. It's the most important is that you understood and you're trying to explain yourself. And finally, if your child is older, definitely older than 2 years old, maybe about the time when your child starts talking, you can also act out the same story in the second language. It also can be applied if your child starts prioritizing one language over another during his or her bilingual reading time, and practice using the same vocabulary as well as memorize words and act them out during the conversation. So the last point that I would like to discuss in this video is why reading those bilingual books is so important for our child development. So the most important thing, I think one of the first things that I would like to talk about is that those kinds of books allow our children to get exposed to the same more sophisticated vocabulary side by side. It allows them to learn new words and also complete semantic processing successfully. If you're utilizing such kind of books in your reading activity with a child from a young age, it will boost his or her vocabulary so much that it would make their first year of kindergarten and even grade school so much easier. What is more, if your child sees those benefits of being able to read and understand the stories in both languages, it would even create just desire to in them to read more by themselves. Actually, based on the recent study that was conducted by Dr. John Hutton and his colleagues at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center, there are significant differences in brain activity between children who are read and read to regularly in their houses and those who receive less cognitive stimulation. Dr. Hutton presented his findings in a lecture titled "Parent-Child Reading Increases Activation of Brain Networks Supporting Emergent Literacy in 3 to 5 year old Children." And it was published actually in April of 2015. And in a press release from the American Academy of Pediatrics, Dr. Hutton said, "We're excited to show for the first time that reading exposure during the critical stage of development prior to kindergarten seems to have a meaningful, measurable impact on how a child's brain processes stories and may help predict reading success." The second reason why reading bilingual books to your children is very important is that they really help your children to feel included. This point is especially applies to those children who consciously or subconsciously are not really confident in their ability to or desire to really utilize multiple languages in their daily lives. And in those cases, when the child is small and he or she is read or starts reading bilingual books on his own, he or she just is going to view it as a reading experience, but a special one, right? Because he or she understands that it's not just a story in one language, it is a story in two languages, almost like two different stories, because the language that we use in order to read the story definitely shapes and creates additional tones and additional secondary meanings to the story. Once the child is older, the selection of those special unique stories for bilingual reading time could just show him or her how special this time is, and therefore urge them to turn and return to this time again and again in the future. The third reason why reading bilingual books to our children is important is because it shows constantly from the very young age that it's important not to just stay bilingual, but also to become biliterate. In my previous videos, I explained why biliteracy and bilingualism are two different things, and how child can be actually both, but later on, once he or she starts going to school and parents or guardians start being less involved in their language education than they were earlier, while a child was still at home, how a child can just become again bilingual and lose this biliteracy skill and never really return to it again. So reading bilingual books can help avoid in such a situation, because once a child masters the skill, it's not going to seem to him or her anymore as a reading skill that requires additional efforts or additional brain work, but it's just going to be become like a second nature to him or her, and they would not think that it requires any extra brain work, and therefore just going to treat it as a habit and going to default to this in the future, and therefore going to read bilingual books as well once they become teenagers and adults. And finally, bilingual books reading provides access to a lesser known vocabulary and lesser known even language. As I mentioned earlier, very often parents start seeing that their child prioritizing one language over another, and this really to any parent who treats their child's bilingual journey seriously and kind of observes his or her process on a daily basis, this becomes pretty obvious very quickly. Like as of right now in our family, for instance, I see that Leon prioritizing English over Russian, and he says more English words than Russian ones. And reading bilingual books is a really great way to kind of correct this process and put more weight on a different side of the scale. So basically kind of force your child to utilize the second language that he or she speaks, and just make sure that while you kind of trying to make this happen, this experience to your child is really fun. And because if it's not fun, if he or she feels like you're pressuring him or her to do it, definitely he's not going to want to do it, right? And only your child can sincerely want to start speaking both languages and actually utilize both languages in the future. Nobody can make him or her do this. Tell jokes, make accents, act out stories, describe book illustrations, make this experience fun, and have fun together with your child. So that was it. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please again make sure to subscribe to my channel down below so you don't miss the next video. And once again, I would like to remind to each of you to make sure to support Ukraine during those horrible, really terrifying and unforgettable times for this country. In the description to this video down below, I'm going to leave all the links and all the information of how you can support people of Ukraine. So please make sure not to stay silent, speak up and support if you can, as much as you can. Every help, every piece of help counts to those people right now. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later. Thank you. Bye.